Throughout the years, Konami's released quite a few SpeedDuel boxes, whether it be with the first debut of the Battle City box original, or with the newest one released, that being Battle City Finals. Nevertheless, this has been one of the greatest pieces of products Konami ever released in their whole line in Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least in my personal opinion. But the one thing that all these boxes share in common is the fact that every single one of these sets is meant to be played in a sealed environment where each individual player goes ahead and picks out one of the decks to face off against another deck within that same box, which got me to thinking, what is the worst deck out of each of these individual sets? So in today's video, that's exactly what I wanted to go and discuss. Now, with that being said, if you guys do end up enjoying today's video and would like to support the channel, then I would really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. So with that being said, let's talk about it. So the first set we're going to be talking about today is going to be none other than the original Battle City box. And with the original Battle City box, this one is very different compared to every other box we got in the future. But the very fact that this box didn't have that many different characters, which is very weird to think in hindsight now, because this box was divided into 3 separate Yugi decks, 2 Kaiba decks, we also had an Esperoba deck, a Rare Hunter deck, and finally an Ishizu deck. Yeah, a very weird spread of characters. So when taking a look at the original Battle City box and what exactly the worst deck was out of this set, my first immediate thought was potentially the Buster Blader deck. I mean, how could it not? This deck didn't have that great of a skill, and additionally, it's pretty clunky having all these skilled magicians in the deck as well. But after taking a deeper look, the deck did have quite a bit available to it, whether it be cards like Book of Moon, cards like the Skilled White Magician, and Breaker the Magical Warrior alongside with Kaiku. It's not that bad of a monster lineup. Additionally, we did have cards like Swift Gaia as well, which weren't bad monsters whatsoever. Taking a deeper dive, I also took a look at some other decks within this set. Another one that really caught my eye as a really bad deck was Kaiba's quote-unquote Blue Eyes White Dragon deck, which in reality wasn't really a Blue Eyes deck. It was merely just a bunch of Kaiba's classic monsters. But the one thing about this deck I can give is the fact that, well, the deck had a lot of beefy monsters, whether it be Lajin, Bosch Raider, Dark Blade, Zambraya, you name it. It had a lot of big hitters that made the deck not feel as fragile as some of the others. In the end, I think the obvious answer was none other than Esperoba. Now, if you're familiar with my channel whatsoever, you know that I have a little bit of a beef with this character in Speed Duels. For the most part, I've never liked a single deck he's ever gotten in any product in Speed Duels, and it shows. With the very first Speed Duel box, he ended up receiving some meshed up deck that combined Jinzo with Earth Warrior and Pac-Man for some reason. The point is, the deck is utterly abysmal. It doesn't do anything properly, and the skills, we shouldn't even go ahead and talk about them because they're that bad. The deck has no cohesion whatsoever, and it really has no backbone to go ahead and lean itself on. So for that very reason, it counts itself as the worst deck out of the original Battle City box. After the release of the original Battle City box, Konami decided to go ahead and move on to the GX era, releasing the Duel Academy box. And this set in concept would have been a really fun set, introducing characters like Jaden, Aster, Alexis, Zane. We also had interesting character additions such as Broly, even Jesse Anderson, and I believe Prowler and Chaz were also in the set. It was packed with a lot of different characters. So what exactly was the worst character to come out of this set? Well, at first glance, I was thinking that it was potentially Jaden. Jaden for a very long time never got any good skills for his hero decks. And for the most part, we were dealing with a lot of the vanilla classics. Sparkmans, Avions, Pretendrix, Claymans, and then we had a roster of monsters that weren't that great either, whether it be cards like Rottweiler, Winkaribo. The deck wasn't all that fantastic. Additionally, the payoff for play in this deck isn't crazy great. We did have good cards like Plasma Vice and Thunder Giant as good boss monsters, but realistically speaking, making these cards was extremely difficult. Besides Jaden having a pretty mediocre deck, another character that came to mind was Chaz. Chaz had a very interesting deck where he tried combining the Ojamas, the Union Machine stuff, alongside Armed Dragon. Surprisingly enough, the deck isn't as bad as I originally thought. It has some level of synergies, it has some broken Ojama cards, and the skill isn't the worst thing ever. Additionally, it has some pretty decent spell and trap card removal that makes the deck actually have some longevity. Not to mention the fact that it technically has an FTK play where if you open the nuts with 3 Ojamas and polymerization, you can technically lock your opponent out at playing the duel, which is pretty awesome. But no, it wasn't Chaz and it wasn't Jaden as the worst character deck out of the Duel Academy box. It actually ended up being a deck that I'm actually a little bit upset about, with Destiny Hero. Destiny Hero is a really awesome dark version of the Elemental Hero archetype, but my goodness, the way that Konami did Aster dirty, it's beyond words. The deck offers almost no real value out of the monsters given to you. We have cards like Dark Angel, which is very difficult to pull off. Blade Master would have been great if we had some bigger Destiny Hero monsters available to you. Dasher does almost nothing in the deck. Doom Lord is cool for nostalgic purposes, and they even give you cards like Plasma and Dogma, which are extremely difficult to summon in this deck. Additionally, once you take a look at the spell and trap card lineup, it's abysmal, helping you very little with what the purpose of the deck is trying to do in summoning out your big fusion monsters. Lastly, this deck had a very underwhelming skill that really did nothing for you besides feeding into the gimmick of Diamond Dude, and I guess trying to find a weird way of summoning out cards like Dogma and Plasma a bit easier. At least that's my read on it. But yeah, there was one saving grace to this deck, with being the copy of Dangerous being very easy to summon, but realistically speaking, the deck is just spoiled really badly. After the release of the Duel Academy box, Konami decided to double down on the GX era, releasing the Midterm Paradox box. And this set is interesting for a few reasons. One, it introduced the concept of a mini box. Instead of having 8 separate characters, we only have 4. But additionally, the characters given to us were very odd choices. Not only did we get another deck for Jaden that is almost a carbon copy of the original deck, with a few changes with the addition of cards like Hero City and Blazeman, additionally with a really good boss monster and Nova Master. But we also got characters like Cyrus, Bastion, and of course, the Paradox Brothers. Now, when talking about the worst deck out of Midterm Paradox, there are a few contenders. Of course, we do have a character like Bastion, which has a really interesting combination deck where it tries to combine the H2O deck with the Naru Turbo strategy. But realistically speaking, when taking a look at the deck a bit closer, the deck is able to still perform pretty okay, which is more than we can say about some other decks in this set. Of course, we could always nominate Jaden once again for the worst deck out of Midterm Paradox, because as we mentioned, it is a carbon copy of the original Duel Academy box, but there are a few very notable changes compared to the original. Those being the fact that Skyscraper 2 is a significantly better field spell over the original Skyscrapers, but additionally, as I already mentioned, Blazeman is an incredible card the deck has access to, which allows you to summon out the Nova Master extremely easy with the normal summon of Blazeman alone. Aside from that, you have ways to get access to Blazeman with cards like A Hero Lives, so Jaden is safe for now. That only leaves the Paradox Brothers as the last option for the worst deck out of the set, and guys, I'm not even gonna try and defend this strategy. The Paradox Brothers have a Mosh Posh deck of just garbage. Not only do you have a ton of bricks in this deck with the Gate Guardian and all its individual pieces, but additionally they decided to give you cards like Labyrinth Wall alongside the Shadow Ghoul, as I genuinely do not know why. I mean, granted, they're from the anime, I get that, but it makes no sense in this deck whatsoever. You have very few monsters that you can actually play in this deck, and at that, 2 of them are the clowns, which need a lot of setup in order to have any form of value. So yeah, the deck is very bad, not to mention the fact that it has some of the worst skills I've heard in all the SpeedDuel, so this was a very easy selection. Paradox Brothers is easily the worst deck out of Midterm Paradox. Moving on from Midterm Paradox onto Duelist of Shadows, and oh my god, Konami decided to go ahead and triple down on the GX era, which is crazy work. Now, when talking about Duelist of Shadows, talking about this set is very difficult for me, but the very fact that this is my absolute favorite SpeedDuel box. It offers a lot of very awesome decks out of it, and realistically speaking, I think all the decks are pretty decent and none of them are outrageously bad. Granted, there are some downsides to some of the decks, and they're a bit more difficult and maybe clunky to play, but for the most part, most of the decks out of Duelist of Shadows are very fun to pilot and are pretty decent, which is a lot more than I can say from the other sets we've just discussed already in this video. But when it comes to the worst deck out of Duelist of Shadows, there are a few contenders. One of the first contenders being Dark Jaden. Dark Jaden again has another version of the Elemental Hero deck that we've seen twice already, but this time around they splashed in some evil heroes. Unfortunately, I don't think I can nominate Jaden as the worst deck out of Duelist of Shadows, for the very fact that the skills that you get access in this set are not half bad. It makes summoning out your boss monster fairly possible, so I've got to give the deck that. Additionally, some of the support cards the deck gets access to, whether it be cards like the Western Etiqua, the Dark World Lightning, and different versions of Polymerization with Dark Fusion and Dark Calling, are not bad whatsoever for the strategy, so for that very reason, it's safe for now. Another character that's worth mentioning in the worst deck out of Duels of Shadows is none other than Titan. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning Titan here is for the very fact that, well, for one, he's playing Archfiends, and at that, Chest of Archfiends, which is a awful deck that has nothing but maintenance costs attached to it for the off chance that you can protect your monster from a targeting effect, which is not great. Additionally, Titan doesn't have some of the best skills in the game either, but there is one thing I can say about Titan, and that's the fact that his monsters are enormous. And honestly, there are random times in a duel where Titan is going to open up a multiple 2k attackers that are just going to beat you down and just dwindle your life points down to 0. So for that very fact, we have to go ahead and omit Titan from this discussion. This leaves us with potentially the worst deck out of the set, and again, as I mentioned, the deck isn't that bad either. It still has a lot of upside, and that deck is the Sacred Beast deck. Now, as I mentioned, I don't think this deck is that bad. It has some pretty good skills, all things considered, and making these Sacred Beast monsters isn't the most difficult thing imaginable. But the big issue with this deck is the fact that if you don't get access to your Sacred Beast monsters or some way, shape, or form of summoning them out, whether it be a combination of fiends, spell traps, the deck struggles quite a bit. Additionally, if your opponent is able to out your one Sacred Beast monster that you put all your resources into, you kinda just lose the duel right then and there. Additionally, the main deck is not fantastic. It has good cards like Dark Summoning Beast, which makes summoning out the Sacred Beast monsters a lot easier, but aside from that, the fiends that they give you aren't great. And same applies to the continuous spells and continuous traps. They aren't all that great. And for that very fact, unfortunately, it has to be the Sacred Beast deck, nominated as the worst deck out of Duels of Shadows. We're now on to Streets of Battle City. It seems like we took a break from the GX era and returned back to the Battle City arc. And honestly, I can only say good things about Streets of Battle City. The set is deceptively very fun, introducing a lot of really interesting characters, but of course we are here discussing the worst deck out of each individual set. So what does Streets of Battle City have that is really bad? Well, there are two decks in particular that I think are egregiously bad when it comes to Streets of Battle City. And those two decks are the following. The first one being Rare Hunter. Now, the reason why I'm nominating Rare Hunter as one of the worst decks to come out of Streets of Battle City is for the very fact that the deck contains nothing but decent cards within it. But that's the thing. This deck has no real strategy whatsoever besides having cool cards within it. The deck does get carried by its powerful spell and trap cards, which saves it from being the worst deck out of Streets of Battle City. But of course, the worst deck out of Streets of Battle City is none other than, oh wow, what a surprise, Esperoba again. This is an upgraded version of the original Battle City box. Don't get me wrong, we actually do get some support for the Jinzo deck, whether it be with the introduction of Jinzo Lord and Jinzo Returner. But aside from that, the deck has a lot of really awful cards that this strategy is just not able to go ahead and take any advantage of it. The skills this deck offers are atrocious as well, making it very difficult to summon out the Jinzo. Esperoba, Konami just didn't know how to make Esperoba a viable deck without making him, air quotes, broken, which is really frustrating. We're now on to Midterm Destruction. It seems like we've made another pit stop onto the GX era. And man, I really like Midterm Destruction. I think this is a perfect way to design a mini box, but there is only one option that in this set that is truly a nominee for worst deck out of Midterm Destruction, and that is none other than Arcana. The Arcana Force deck is awful. It's really bad. Every monster in this deck has a pretty good heads effect and an atrocious tails effect that makes it very difficult to play. Additionally, the support that the deck gets is pretty good. The only issue with the support is the fact that it also requires you to go ahead and flip a coin, which wouldn't be a big deal if the skill fixed this for them. And it kind of did, but not in the way you would think. The skills that Arcana got were okay, kinda. One of them was a card that saw a lot of play in other decks that utilized the effect to always land heads on their Cup of Ace. But the catch was, it was at the cost of half your life points, which most good decks didn't really care. However, Arcana Force is anything but a good deck. Therefore, paying half your life points to go ahead and land a heads effect on one of your Arcana Force monsters, well, that didn't really feel all that worth it. And honestly, it's for that very reason that Arcana Force has to be the worst deck out of Midterm Destruction. Oh wow, we're now on the last set that Konami's ever released for SpeedDuel with Battle City Finals, ending it all where it started, Battle City. Battle City Finals. This set really did go out with a bang, creating some of the most powerful decks we've seen out of any SpeedDuel box, and it shows. There's a lot of really great strategies to come out of this set, and honestly, breaking down what the worst deck was out of this was kind of difficult. I'm lying. It was actually very easy to decide what the worst deck was out of this. It was Kaiba. It was always going to be Kaiba. Kaiba has a crisis of a deck. It tried combining Obelisk with Blue Eye support, and with that with the XYZ deck as well. Did it do it justice? Not at all. Not even close. The deck is very confused as to what exactly it's trying to do. For the most part, it's trying to summon out Obelisk, kinda, but it does it in a very poor way. The skill the deck gets access to is not good either. Honestly, both skills are not great, especially in a sealed environment. The only great thing about this deck is the fact that the spell and trap card lineup are pretty good, but it does not save it from the fact that the deck is very clunky, very prone to breaking, and honestly, it's gonna lose you a lot of duels because of that. The point is, Kaiba's deck is just not really all there. It's just bad. It doesn't do anything well. And yeah, it's kind of a shame that Kaiba, they did Kaiba dirty, honestly. Alright then, and with that guys, that concludes today's video. In the comment section below, let me know, did you agree with my takes? Did you disagree with any of my takes? Do you think that the decks I listed as the worst are actually the worst, or was it something else? I'd love to hear all your thoughts in the comment section below. But yeah guys, with that being said, if you guys did end up enjoying today's video and would like to support the channel, then I would really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe. But with that being said guys, thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye guys.